Today, we're going to be going over some rules of route running that all wide receivers must not break. So the first rule is do not be married to a press release. This is a perfect example of a press release that you guys can use that will allow you to react off of whatever a DB shows post snap. So I'm going to play this full speed and then we'll break it down. So this is a wide receiver using like a little hesitation skip release, takes the outside release, is able to stack this DB and then win over the top on a deep post. So what do I mean by being married to a press release? So every single wide receiver, when they're deciding what to do off the line of scrimmage, they come up to the line, they identify two things with the DB. They identify his leverage and then the distance from him. And that's how we determine what press release I'm going to use. So this DB's lined up inside shade press. He's maybe about like a yard, half a yard away. Okay, cool. I know he's trying to take away the inside route like a slant, maybe like a post, like a dig, and he's trying to force me to the outside to the sideline. So a lot of wide receivers get in their head just one simple press release. Okay, I'm going to do like a little quick jab to the inside and then I'm just going to go. But what if the DB changes up his leverage? What if that DB overcommits? A lot of wide receivers, what they'll do is they'll throw this jab to the inside. That DB will change up his leverage, jump to the outside, and then these wide receivers panic. They're screwed. They end up running into the leverage, get rerouted way outside because they didn't have a release that allowed them to react. So this is a hesitation skip release that will allow you to do that. So the first step of this release is with the back foot. You kick behind your front foot. So that kind of like loads up your hips, helps you load up. So your next step can be this hop with your left foot. So you want to hop at a 45-degree angle. So we kick behind and then we hop at this 45 and you land with that left foot. Now, the reason why we do this, the reason why we hesitate is to obviously slow down the DB's tempo, but we're trying to gather info on him, and we're in a position where I could react if this DB overcommits. So we hesitate at this 45-degree angle. We are making this DB choose. That DB could either sit and hold to his leverage, which we think he might do pre-snap, or when I hesitate to the outside, he could jump and overcommit. But the great part about this hesitation skip is if that DB does overcommit, I could put the brakes on with my right foot, jab, and take the inside release and still be able to run my post. So this is a release that you are not necessarily married to. You could react. You could still put the brakes on and take that inside release. So remember, guys, you kick behind with the front foot, you hesitate and skip. If that DB sits to the inside, let's just take it and let's go beat him with speed and take that outside release. He's sitting disciplined to the inside because that's his leverage. But if he disguised that leverage and he jumps way to the outside, I put the brakes on and take that inside release, get skinny, and work over the top. So this is a great release here. This is a great example from Nashawn Montgomery working that hesitation skip. Make sure we attack at that 45 because that makes that DB ultimately make a decision. Now, the next rule of route running that you do not want to break is not giving your quarterback enough space to lead you. Now, before we break down what exactly that means, if you're a wide receiver, fellas, and you guys would like a daily training schedule that you can follow, check out that very first link in the description below for our elite wide receiver training package. What you'll get access to is 8 weeks of wide receiver on-field drills for route running, press releases, catching. We break everything down and put it into a schedule for you. Like Monday, you're doing this, Tuesday, you're doing that, give you the exact sets and reps, and a video example of each drill. Also, we include a gym workout plan that's structured the exact same way. We give you the exact gym workouts that wide receivers need to be doing with the exact sets and reps and examples of each one. So if you guys want an elite wide receiver training package with other things included as well, other than those gym and field plans, check out that very first link in the description below. Again, guys, very first link in that description below. Let's get back to this video. So now, like we said, we want to give the quarterback room to lead us. And this is more specifically on outside breaking routes, like an out route, like a comeback, like a corner, and that comes from not forcing my release. So this wide receiver is running like a 15-yard corner route, and we have a DB who's sitting off man coverage about 7 to 8 yards. Outside leverage. So a lot of wide receivers, what they would do because they're running a corner route is they would think, okay, off the ball, I'm going to try to run, like I'm going to attack him, give him a fake inside, get to the outside release, and then go. But remember, like we talked about from that last example, a DB's leverage that we see pre-snap tells me what he's trying to prevent. So he's trying to prevent me from going to the outside right now. So if I just try to run around him, he's going to widen. And when that DB widens, they call that squeezing. He's going to squeeze me to that sideline, and that cuts down the amount of space that the quarterback expects me to give him, right? So you guys almost want to stay right next to this hash because on paper, that's how the route's actually drawn up. And that's what this wide receiver does. So he attacks this DB's leverage, gives him a move, attacks his leverage outside, gets over the top, and gives that quarterback plenty of room to lead us on this corner route or outside breaking route. So let's talk about it, right? So as he's approaching this DB, he's gathering info. Now, remember rule number 1 that we talked about. We always want to be prepared to react. So if we're attacking this DB and we're attacking his leverage, but let's say he starts to weave to the inside or maybe maybe starts to backpedal. Okay, cool. I can just break right in front of him. You don't want to be married to the move that you are using, where you're just committed to that move and that's it. Now, if we start to attack him and we start to close the distance, anytime that we have distance between us and a DB, we have to close the distance and we have to get to his toes because that forces him to have to react, but that makes it easier for us to do something called restacking, and we'll talk about that. But when he closes the space with him, this DB starts to keep that leverage to the outside. He starts to widen, he starts to hold it. So what are we going to do? We're going to attack his leverage. That's our initial plan off the line of scrimmage. Make him think we're going outside to jump because he's trying to protect the outside. And then I take my inside release, and because I'm close to him, it makes it easier for me to squeeze past him, aka get skinny, aka work to stack. Stacking a DB is where we have this DB trailing behind my back hip, where he's running behind me, right? I can't do that if I'm far away. Let's say we close the distance with this DB, right? But we throw a move right here at this yard line, and he jumps. I still got to go get to 15. So even if he jumps, he could still cut me off, and then I'm running my corner right into this DB. And that's why a lot of guys don't like taking the quote-unquote inside release when they have to run an outside breaking route like a corner or an out route. So let's make sure we close the distance. Let's get to his toes, make him think we're going outside so I can squeeze right past him, get over the top, and now I give him a move like I'm faking to the inside, but look at the space we gave my QB. So remember, a rule that you cannot break: do not give your quarterback no room to lead you. You have to give the quarterback to lead you, or have to give the quarterback room to lead you on any type of outside breaking route. All right, so next rule that all wide receivers cannot break is make sure that you are violent with your hip drop. So on every single route where you guys got to drop your hips, what routes are those? That's like a hitch, that's like a comeback, that's like a curl. This is an example of a wide receiver taking an outside release when he has to run an inside breaking route, but he's not able to stack the DB. Remember, we just talked about it. What's stacking the DB? That's when a DB is chasing us. But if he can't chase us and he's right next to me, hip to hip with me, what I want to do is I want to put the brakes on, and that means drop my hips and slip under him. You don't always have to drop your hips on a dig route, but in this situation you do, because we got to slip under the DB, and you have to be violent with your hip drop, okay? So let me play this full speed. So at the break point, you see how violent he drops, that trigger step with the outside foot, because that is what ultimately decelerates him. So let's talk about this, right? So on every route where you got to drop your hips, like we said, you have to sell vertical. We have to get this DB to open up his hips to the opposite end zone. What we have to focus on is my speed frequency, my stride frequency, and my body language frequency. Now, what I mean by frequency is I mean keeping it the same. It's got to be the same frequency from the top of the, or from the start of the route to the top of the route. So that means that you don't need to be running hunched over, but your body language should not change. Everything about your body language should remain the same. Everything about your stride length should remain the same. He gives this little jab inside to try to like kind of get this DB to settle a little bit, to even more so sell vertical. You don't have to worry about that too much, but let's focus on the strides, right? So he gives a little jab inside, but look at the stride length. He doesn't take these choppy steps right before he breaks. He's confident in his hip drop, because the hip drop is enough to slow you down when you maintain your speed, your stride, and your body language frequency. So if you can trust your hips, you're going to be able to get in and out of this break a little bit easier. Now, reason why we want to be violent is because when you're running with this type of speed or running with this type of frequency, it's a lot easier said than done to be able to change direction. A lot of guys going into the break, what they'll do is they'll run with that speed and that frequency, but their hips drop very, very slow, and they end up taking a bunch of steps at the break. They'll probably drift on the break a little bit. It's not a sharp cut. The whole reason we want to drop my level is so I can make a sharp cut. And when I drop my level, because I'm running with a lot of speed, it's got to happen fast. You got to almost think of it like you got a string attached to your chin. Somebody's pulling that string straight down. You were trying to reach down and tie your shoes as quickly as you can. You almost want to think of it like you're playing musical chairs. The music stops. What do? You sit on down. But if you could sit to that 90-degree angle, drop that chin to my knee as violently, as quickly as possible, that's going to help you slow yourself down, but it has to be violent. So a rule that wide receivers cannot break: you have to be violent when you are dropping your hips. I don't care if it's a 5-yard hitch, 15-yard comeback, or 12-yard dig like this. That's how you have to get in and out of your breaks. Now, next rule that wide receivers cannot break is you have to step outside of a DB's frame to get him to move. So what do I mean by that? Let's watch this example here. So this wide receiver is facing a DB who is lined up in head-up press coverage, and he is going to be running a post route. So this is not like that first example of a post route where we had a DB who's inside shade. Remember, we did that little skip to the outside. We're trying to get him to pick one. Is he going to jump, or is he going to stay? And then and if he stays, we take off. If he jumps, we put the brakes on and go inside. So this wide receiver has got head-up press. So that means I would love an inside release on an inside inside breaking route. So that's what I'm going to try to set up off the line. So this wide receiver shows a perfect example of stepping outside the DB's frame to get him to move, because it's the only way that he's going to move. But when I do that, I have to bring my hips and I have to bring my upper body with the move. So let's talk about it. So he does a little kick step, wide step release, DB jumps, takes that inside release and gets skinny, and then is able to win on that post route. So let's talk about this here. So this back foot sets up the step, but let me backtrack. Whenever you got a head up press coverage DB, you want to think of it like you're driving. Right? So when you're driving, you're in the car, you got the far left lane, you got the middle lane, and then you got the far right lane, right? So if I want to take an inside release, I got to step all the way to this far right lane to get the DB to move to the right lane. A lot of wide receivers, they'll just step, and they stay inside of this DB's frame and they stay in the middle lane. I got to step all the way to the far right lane. So this wide receiver uses something called a kick step into this jab or wide step. Some people refer to it as a jab. I call it a wide step because you're literally stepping wide. It's exactly how it sounds. So this back foot steps very, very quick behind your front foot. And what that does is that loads up your hips and that creates some energy. It's very, very hard to step outside of a DB's frame without some type of energy source from your stance, whether that's like a quick little jab step with your front foot or whether that's a kick step with your back foot. So he kicks to load up his hips so he could spring to the outside. And you see how far he is able to step. That's what gets a DB to move. Now, the reason why you load up your hips with the kick step is it makes it easier for you to bring your hip with your foot. I tell my receivers this all the time. When you step wide, your hip and your head want to go with your foot. And if you can do that, we got a DB who's in press coverage, obviously watching my hips. When your foot goes to the far right lane and you bring your hips and you bring your shoulders, he has to commit to it. He has to, because he can't just sit like that for forever and let you go run a fade. There's obviously got to be some speed to this move, and that's why that kick step being quick will also create some explosion. But guys, if you got head up press, we have to step outside that DB's frame to be able to get him to move. Now, let's say, for example, he had to run like a fade or an out route or a corner route. What he could do is he could do this little kick step with the front foot. He could jab here and then throw back to the inside with his inside foot and work something called a double up or a crossover. Same principles apply. We got to step outside of his frame. We have to make sure that my hip and my head go with my foot, and that will help us sell it. But guys, a rule that you cannot break as a wide receiver: do not step inside the DB's frame when trying to get him to move. Step outside his frame and bring your body with that cut.